This story contains themes that some may find intense, including suspense, psychological distress, and elements of crime. Listener discretion is advised. It was a Tuesday, a perfectly unremarkable Tuesday, which is precisely why what happened next shattered my world into a million impossible pieces. I remember the exact time, 3:17 p.m., the chime of my apartment doorbell, a sound I usually ignored while deep in coding, somehow cut through the hum of my desktop fan and the low thrum of the city outside my window. David Miller, a creature of habit, a software engineer whose life revolved around predictable algorithms and logical outcomes, was about to have every single one of those algorithms irrevocably broken. I wasn't expecting anything. No online orders, no birthday gifts, nothing. Still, the doorbell persisted, a little more insistent now. Reluctantly, I pushed back from my desk, the squeak of my chair a familiar companion to my daily grind. My apartment, a modest two-bedroom in a decent part of Portland, Oregon, felt safe, predictable. That feeling was about to evaporate. Through the peephole, I saw a young delivery guy, probably fresh out of high school, fidgeting with a clipboard. He wore the standard uniform of a well-known express courier service. Nothing out of the ordinary. I swung open the door, a polite smile ready. "David Miller?" he asked, his voice cracking slightly. "That's me," I confirmed, reaching for the pen. He handed me the clipboard, his eyes scanning past me into my apartment, a flicker of curiosity there, or maybe just boredom. As I scrawled my signature, my gaze drifted to the package in his hands. It was a standard brown cardboard box, medium-sized, taped securely. But what stopped my breath, what made my blood run cold, wasn't the box itself but the label. The sender's address was mine, my exact address, and the sender's name, David Miller, my name. But beneath it, in bold, stark lettering, were three impossible words. From David Miller 2034. My hand froze, pen hovering over the signature line. "Wait," I mumbled, my voice a little rougher than I intended. "What is this?" The delivery guy shrugged, already pulling the box back. "Just a package, man. Says it's for you. Signature required." "No, I mean the sender. David Miller 2034. I pointed, my finger trembling slightly. He glanced at the label, a faint frown creasing his brow. "Huh. Weird. Must be a joke or something, right? People put all sorts of stuff on labels." He offered a weak chuckle, but his eyes didn't quite meet mine. He was clearly uncomfortable. My mind raced. A prank? Who would pull a prank like this? It wasn't my birthday. None of my friends were particularly known for elaborate time travel-themed jokes. And the courier service, they wouldn't deliver something with a date like that, would they? It felt too official, too real despite the absurdity. "Look, I just need your signature, man. I got a schedule." His impatience was growing. Swallowing hard, I signed. My mind was still reeling. As he handed me the box, it felt heavier than it looked, not just physically, but with an unseen weight of implications. The delivery guy muttered a quick, "Have a good one," and practically bolted down the hallway. I didn't blame him. I probably looked like I'd just seen a ghost. I closed the door, the click of the lock sounding unnaturally loud in the sudden silence. The package sat in my hands, a mundane object now radiating an unsettling aura. David Miller 2034. My future self. It was a ludicrous thought, something out of a cheap sci-fi novel. Not my quiet, predictable life. But the label was real. The box was real. And the tremor in my hands was definitely real. I carried it to my kitchen table, placing it gently on the worn wood. My heart was pounding a frantic rhythm against my ribs. I stared at it, trying to will it to be a mistake, a misprint, anything but what it claimed to be. But the words were clear, crisp, printed with professional precision. Taking a deep, shaky breath, I grabbed a utility knife from a drawer. My fingers fumbled with the tape, each rip sounding like a gunshot in the quiet apartment. As the flap slowly opened, a faint, musty smell wafted out, like old paper and something metallic. My breath hitched. The first thing I saw was a photograph. It was folded, creased, and slightly water-damaged, the colors muted, almost sepia-toned. I carefully unfolded it, my eyes widening in horror as the image came into full view. It was my apartment building. My building. But it wasn't the familiar, sturdy structure I saw every day. It was a charred skeleton, half collapsed, smoke still curling from shattered windows against a bruised orange sky. Flames licked at the lower floors, and debris was strewn across the street where cars usually parked. It looked like a war zone. My stomach lurched. This wasn't just a building. The unique architectural details, the specific angle. It was undeniably mine, or rather what was left of it. I dropped the photo, my hand flying to my mouth, a choked gasp escaping my lips. This was no prank. This was a nightmare delivered right to my door. Beneath the photo, nestled amongst some crumpled packing paper, was a small tarnished silver locket. It was oval-shaped, intricately engraved with swirling patterns I didn't recognize, but something about it felt familiar. An unsettling sense of déjà vu washed over me. I picked it up, expecting it to be cold, but it felt strangely warm, almost alive in my palm. It was closed tightly, no obvious clasp. I tried to pry it open, but it resisted, a stubborn, silent enigma. Where had this come from? I'd never owned anything like it. Yet, the familiarity persisted. A whisper of a memory I couldn't quite grasp. My eyes darted back into the box. There was one more item, tucked away at the very bottom. A small black USB drive. It was plain, unbranded, almost generic, but its presence here, amidst the wreckage of my future and the mysterious locket, made it anything but. My mind screamed at me to plug it in, to find answers, but a primal fear held me back. What horrors might it contain? What truths about my impending doom? Then, as I shifted the packing paper one last time, a folded piece of paper caught my eye. It was a single sheet, torn from a notepad, the edges rough. And the handwriting, it was undeniably mine. My messy loops, my slightly slanted T's, the way I always connected the H and N. My blood ran colder than ice. I unfolded it, my eyes devouring the words. They were scrawled hastily, as if written in a desperate hurry, or under immense duress. Don't trust Jessica. She's the key. You have 7 days. The air left my lungs in a silent whoosh. Jessica. My girlfriend. Jessica Rodriguez. The woman I loved, the woman I shared this apartment with, the woman who was due home from her shift at the hospital any minute. Don't trust Jessica? She's the key? You have 7 days? My gaze snapped to the kitchen clock, its hands ticking away the seconds, mocking me with their relentless march forward. 7 days. 7 days until what? Until my apartment building became the ruin in that photograph? Until Jessica, what? Betrayed me? Became a key to something terrible? Panic, cold and sharp, began to claw its way up my throat. This wasn't a joke. This wasn't a mistake. This was a direct, terrifying message from my future self. A desperate plea, a warning. And it implicated the one person I trusted most in the world. I stumbled backward, bumping into the counter, the clatter of a spice jar making me jump. My eyes darted around the apartment, every shadow suddenly seeming to hold a secret, every creak of the building a potential threat. Was I already being watched? Was Jessica involved right now? Was she coming home to play a part in this unfolding nightmare? My mind was a whirlwind of impossible questions. How did this package travel through time? Why me? Why now? And what exactly was Jessica's role in all of this? The photograph of my destroyed home flashed behind my eyes, a terrifying premonition. The locket, warm in my hand, felt like a ticking bomb. And the USB drive, a Pandora's box I was terrified to open. I looked down at the note again, my own handwriting condemning my future. Don't trust Jessica. The words burned into my retina. I thought of her laugh, her kind eyes, the way she always knew how to cheer me up after a tough day at work. Could that really be a facade? Could the woman I planned a future with be the architect of my doom? A chill snaked down my spine, a feeling of profound isolation. If I couldn't trust Jessica, who could I trust? My future self clearly thought she was a danger to me, or to something else. And I had 7 days to figure it out, 7 days before whatever horror awaited me in the future became my present. The clock was ticking, and I was standing at the precipice of a truth I wasn't sure I wanted to uncover. This was just the beginning, and I knew with a horrifying certainty that my life would never be the same. My life would never be the same. The words echoed in the hollow space of my apartment, each syllable a hammer blow against the fragile walls of my reality. I stumbled back from the table, my hand still trembling from where it had dropped the letter. The package, an innocuous cardboard box just moments before, now pulsed with an unseen malevolent energy, a direct conduit from a future I couldn't comprehend. My breath hitched in my throat. This wasn't a prank. The detail, the precision, the sheer audacity of it. No one I knew was capable of such an elaborate, unsettling deception. and the stakes felt too high, too visceral to be a joke. My own handwriting, my own distinctive scrawl, staring back at me from a letter dated years in the future. It was an impossibility made terrifyingly real. I forced myself to breathe deep, shuddering breaths that did little to calm the frantic drumbeat of my heart. My eyes darted around the apartment, searching for an explanation, a hidden camera, anything that would shatter this nightmare into 1,000 pieces of logical truth. But there was nothing, just the familiar, comforting clutter of my living space, now tainted by the chilling intrusion of the unknown. My gaze fell back to the table. The package lay open, its contents partially spilled. The letter, a stark white rectangle against the dark wood, seemed to glow with an ominous light. Beside it, the small metallic glint of the USB drive. I remembered the letter's urgent instruction: play the USB. Alone. No one must see. My mind raced, grappling with a whirlwind of questions. Who sent this? How? Why? Was this a warning? A test? A desperate plea? And if it was from my future self, what horrors awaited me that necessitated such a drastic, time-bending intervention? The thought was a cold knot in my stomach. I cautiously approached the table again, my movements slow, as if any sudden motion might trigger some unseen consequence. My fingers, still numb, reached for the letter, rereading the final lines, searching for any nuance I might have missed in my initial panic. Trust no one. The clock is ticking. Your life depends on what you do next. Trust no one. The words were a venomous whisper, poisoning every relationship, every interaction I had. Who was I not supposed to trust? Everyone. My best friend Jessica, my colleague David, my family. The isolation was immediate and profound, a suffocating blanket woven from paranoia. My eyes drifted to the USB drive. It was a standard black flash drive, no discernible markings, no brand, just a small, unassuming device that held, according to my future self, the key to my survival. Or perhaps the key to my undoing. The risk felt immense. What if it was a trap? What if it was a virus not just for my computer but for my mind? Despite the churning fear, a strange, almost morbid curiosity began to assert itself. My future self had gone to extraordinary lengths to send this. There had to be a reason, a crucial message that transcended the bounds of time. I had to know. I had to understand. The alternative, remaining in ignorance, felt like a slow, agonizing surrender to an unknown fate. My laptop sat on the coffee table, a beacon of modern technology that suddenly felt incredibly archaic in the face of this temporal anomaly. I picked up the USB drive, weighted in my palm. It was cool, smooth, and utterly ordinary, yet it hummed with an invisible power, a silent promise of revelations to come. I walked over to my laptop, my movements stiff like a robot. My apartment, usually a haven, now felt like a cage. Every shadow seemed to deepen. Every creak of the old building structure sounded like a stealthy footstep. I felt utterly exposed, vulnerable. The letter had stripped away my sense of security, leaving me raw and on edge. Before inserting the drive, I did a quick mental check. Was I alone? Yes. Had anyone seen me receive the package? No, it was left on the porch. Could anyone be listening? I scoffed at the thought, but then remembered the trust no one warning. Paranoia was a powerful intoxicant. I pulled the blinds shut, double-checked the lock on my door, and even muted my phone. The absurdity of it was almost comical, but the underlying dread was very real. With a deep breath, I inserted the USB drive into my laptop. The familiar Windows chime signaled its recognition. A new drive icon appeared on my desktop. Future_me. My heart pounded a frantic rhythm against my ribs. Even the name felt like a punch to the gut. I double-clicked. The folder opened, revealing a single file. Message 4. A video file. Of course, my future self wouldn't just send text. They'd send a direct, undeniable message. My finger hovered over the play button. This was it. The point of no return. Once I clicked, whatever was inside would be unleashed. There was no unseeing, no unknowing. My life, as my future self had so chillingly predicted, would truly never be the same. A bead of sweat trickled down my temple. What would I see? My own face, older, wearier, haunted? A scene of destruction? A warning of an impending disaster? My mind raced through 1,000 horrific possibilities, each one more terrifying than the last. I thought about calling Jessica just to tell someone, anyone, but the words "trust no one" echoed in my head. What if Jessica was involved? What if telling her put her in danger? Or worse, put me in danger? The isolation was absolute. I was alone in this, with only a package from my future self as my guide. With a final resolute breath, I clicked the play button. The screen flickered, then resolved into a dimly lit room. My stomach lurched. It was my apartment, my living room, but it was different. Cluttered, messy, a layer of grime suggesting neglect. And then a figure moved into view. It was me, or rather a version of me. Older, visibly aged, with deep lines etched around my eyes and mouth. My hair was longer, streaked with gray, and my clothes were disheveled, as if I hadn't slept in days. There was a gauntness to my face, a haunted look in my eyes that sent a shiver down my spine. This wasn't just an older me, this was a broken me. My future self looked directly into the camera, his gaze piercing through the screen, meeting my present eyes with an intensity that was both terrifying and heartbreaking. His voice, when it came, was hoarse, strained, as if he hadn't spoken in a long time. "Michael," he began, and the sound of my own name, spoken by my future self, was profoundly unsettling. "If you're watching this, then the package made it. Thank God. We didn't have much time. I don't have much time now either." His voice cracked on the last word, and he coughed, a dry, rattling sound that seemed to emanate from deep within his chest. He clutched his side, wincing in pain. A flicker of fear, raw and visceral, shot through me. What had happened to him? What was happening to me? "Listen very carefully," future Michael continued, his voice regaining a desperate urgency. "Everything you know, everything you believe, it's a lie. The world you live in is not what it seems. And you, Michael, you are at the center of it." My blood ran cold. A lie? What lie? What could be so fundamental, so pervasive, that it encompassed my entire reality? And what did he mean I was at the center of it? Future Michael leaned closer to the camera, his eyes wide with a frantic desperation. "They're watching you. They've been watching you for a long time. You don't know it yet, but you've been marked. A target. And time is running out." My heart hammered against my ribs, a frantic drumbeat of terror. They? Who were they? And marked for what? The abstract fear of the letter was suddenly replaced by a very real, very present sense of danger. I felt a prickle on the back of my neck, the chilling sensation of unseen eyes upon me, even in the safety of my own apartment. "The date on the letter," future Michael said, his voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper. "It's not just a warning for that specific day. It's the deadline, the day they come for you. And if you don't act, if you don't follow my instructions, you won't survive it." He paused, taking another ragged breath, his eyes darting around the room, as if expecting someone to appear at any moment. The paranoia was palpable, radiating from the screen and infecting me. "I've tried to warn myself before," he confessed, a look of profound weariness on his face. "But they always found the messages, always intercepted them. This package, this was my last resort, my only chance to save you, to save us." The implication hung heavy in the air. If he was trying to save us, it meant his survival was tied to mine. Or perhaps my survival was the only way to prevent his own tragic fate. "Here's what you need to do," future Michael said, his voice firming with a newfound resolve, despite his obvious pain. "First, check your apartment. There's a hidden device. A tracker. It's small, almost undetectable. They use it to monitor your every move, every conversation. You have to find it, Michael. And you have to destroy it." My eyes immediately scanned my living room, suddenly seeing every innocuous object as a potential hiding spot. A tracker? In my own home? The violation was sickening. How long had it been there? How much had they seen? How much had they heard? The walls of my apartment, once a comfort, now felt like the transparent skin of a fishbowl. "I can't tell you exactly where it is," future Michael continued, his voice strained. "They changed the locations, but it's usually in a place you wouldn't look. Somewhere mundane. A power strip. Behind a picture frame. Inside a book. It emits a faint high-frequency pulse. You won't hear it, but a specific frequency detector will. I've included one in the package. It's small, disguised as a pin." My gaze snapped back to the open package on the table. In my haste and panic, I had only focused on the letter and the USB. Now I saw it. Tucked neatly beneath a layer of bubble wrap was a sleek metallic pen. It looked like any other high-end writing instrument, But my future self had just revealed its true chilling purpose. Once you find it, future Michael urged, his voice growing weaker, don't just disable it. Destroy it completely. Smash it. Burn it. Make sure there's nothing left to trace back to you. And then, he paused, a new, even more terrifying urgency entering his voice. Then we can talk about what comes next. Because what you're about to uncover, Michael, is far bigger than you could ever imagine. And you're already in too deep. The video flickered, the image distorting, as if the signal was failing. Future Michael's face contorted in pain, his hand flying to his side again. He gasped, a pained guttural sound. Remember, he choked out, his voice barely a whisper, trust no one, not even yourself. Not yet. Find the tracker. Destroy it. Your life depends on it. My life depends on it. And then with a final agonizing groan, the screen went black. The video ended. Silence descended upon my apartment, thick and oppressive, broken only by the frantic pounding of my own heart. The image of my future self, broken and in pain, haunted my vision. Tracker. In my home. And a pen that was actually a detector. My hands instinctively went to the package, fumbling for the disguised device. The game had begun, and I was already playing for my life. My hands instinctively went to the package, fumbling for the disguised device. The game had begun, and I was already playing for my life. My fingers tore at the cardboard, ripping through the layers of bubble wrap that still clung to the seemingly innocuous items. The pen clutched in my other hand, pulsed with a faint, almost imperceptible tremor guiding me. It wasn't a strong signal, which meant the tracker was small, expertly hidden. I tossed aside the old, dog-eared copy of Moby Dick my future self had apparently enjoyed. Then the cheap plastic keychain that depicted a miniature Eiffel Tower. Nothing. Just ordinary junk. But the pen kept vibrating, a low hum against my palm, its intensity unwavering. It was in the package, somewhere within the packaging itself, not one of the visible items. I began systematically dissecting the box. First, I peeled back the brown packing tape, then carefully separated the flaps. Inside, between the outer cardboard shell and an inner lining, there it was. A minuscule, almost imperceptible disc, no larger than a ladybug, affixed with industrial-strength adhesive. It was black, featureless, a tiny void designed to blend into any shadow. My breath hitched. This wasn't some off-the-shelf eBay gadget. This was professional military-grade surveillance. The pen in my hand suddenly glowed with a soft, steady green light. A tiny, almost invisible button on its side, previously unnoticed, seemed to beckon. Pressed it. A high-pitched whine, barely audible to my ears, emanated from the pen. It lasted only a second, a sharp, piercing frequency that made the hair on my arm stand on end. And then silence. The green light faded. The pen went dark, inert. I looked at the tiny disc. Still looked the same, but somehow I knew. The connection was severed. The eyes were blind. A wave of cold relief washed over me, quickly followed by a fresh surge of terror. He had been right. My future self had been right. Someone was tracking me. Someone had put this device in my home. How? When? And more importantly, why? My mind raced, trying to piece together the shattered fragments of my normal life. I was just Michael Davies, an unremarkable software developer, living in a quiet suburban house. I had no enemies, no secrets that warranted this kind of intrusion. I scooped up the inert tracker, examining it closer. It felt cold, lifeless. Whatever power source it had, whatever transmission it was capable of, had been utterly fried by the pen's EMP-like burst. This pen wasn't just a detector. It was a weapon, a silent surgical instrument against insidious surveillance. My gaze flickered back to the note, still lying on the table amidst the scattered packing materials. They know about the package, it had warned, and they have eyes and ears everywhere. The tracker was just one pair of eyes. What about the ears? What about other eyes? A sudden chilling thought struck me. If they knew about the package, they would know when the tracker went dark. They would know I knew. This wasn't just about finding the device. It was about the immediate aftermath. I was no longer a clueless target. I was an aware target, and that made me infinitely more dangerous and infinitely more vulnerable. My pulse hammered in my ears. I needed to move. I needed to think. But every instinct screamed for flight. I scanned my living room, the familiar comfort now an illusion. A fragile shell around a hidden threat. The smart speaker on the kitchen counter. Its tiny light, usually a reassuring blue, now seemed ominous. The webcam on my laptop, usually covered with a piece of tape, now felt like a gaping maw. Even the smoke detector on the ceiling, a benign fixture, seemed to hold a sinister potential. Paranoia, a sensation I'd only ever experienced in movies, was now a tangible, suffocating presence in my own home. I grabbed the pen and the now useless tracker, stuffing them into my pocket. My eyes darted around, searching for anything out of place, anything that could be another listening device, another hidden camera. The future self's message echoed. They have eyes and ears everywhere. It wasn't hyperbole. It was a literal warning. I moved through my house like a ghost, my footsteps silent, my senses on high alert. I checked the vents, the light fixtures, the backs of picture frames. Nothing obvious. But the sheer professionalism of the tracker I'd found meant that any other devices would be just as expertly concealed. This wasn't a job for a quick sweep. This required specialized equipment, something I definitely didn't have. Except for the pen. I pulled out the pen again. Could it detect other things? I pressed the hidden button again, but nothing happened. It was dark, silent, just a regular pen now. It seemed its single powerful burst had drained it, or perhaps it was a one-time use feature for that specific type of tracker. Or maybe it needed to recharge. I didn't know. The future self hadn't sent an instruction manual. My gaze fell back on the crumpled note. It was just a single sheet of paper, scrawled with urgent, almost desperate handwriting. I smoothed it out, reading it again, slower this time, searching for any nuance I might have missed in my initial panic. Michael, this is from your future self. I don't have much time. They know about the package. They have eyes and ears everywhere. Trust no one. Find the watch. It's the key. Don't let them get it. My life, your life depends on it. Good luck. M. Find the watch. The word stood out, stark and urgent. A watch? What watch? I didn't own any particularly special watches. My everyday watch was a cheap digital one. Was it a watch that was in the package? I ripped open the remaining bubble wrap, scattering the last few pieces of junk mail and packing peanuts. Nothing. No watch. Just the old Moby Dick, the keychain, and a few promotional flyers. Then it hit me. The package was sent to me. My future self wouldn't send me a watch in the package if the warning was, "They know about the package." That would be too obvious, too easily intercepted. No, the watch had to be something already in my possession, or something I was meant to find elsewhere. But where? Find the watch. It was a cryptic instruction, maddeningly vague. Was it a physical watch? Or was the watch a code word for something else entirely? A location? Person? A deadline? My mind spun with possibilities, each one more terrifying than the last. I thought about my routine, my work, my friends, my family. Who could they be? And what did they want with me, or with this mysterious watch? The future self's broken voice, the pain in his eyes. It wasn't just a warning. It was a plea. A desperate, final appeal from a man who had lost everything. I needed to secure my immediate environment. My home was compromised. I couldn't trust it. I couldn't trust anything. The tracker was gone, but the threat remained, now amplified by my awareness. They would be looking for the signal, wondering why it had suddenly ceased. They would be coming. My eyes fell on my phone, sitting innocently on the coffee table. Could it be compromised? Every device connected to the internet, every smart appliance, every digital footprint felt like a potential vulnerability. I picked it up, feeling a knot of dread twist in my stomach. What if they were tracking my location through GPS? What if they were listening through the microphone? I powered it off. A small defiant act. But it wouldn't be enough. I needed to disappear. Or at least become invisible. But where would I go? And how could I find the watch if I was constantly looking over my shoulder? The clock on the wall ticked loudly, each second amplifying the silence of my suddenly menacing home. I had to assume they were already en route, their sophisticated equipment pinpointing the last known location of the tracker. They wouldn't just give up. Not if my life depended on it. I needed to gather essentials. Cash, a change of clothes, my car keys. But as I moved towards my bedroom, a glint caught my eye. On my bedside table, tucked discreetly beneath a stack of old magazines, was a small, ornate wooden box. I hadn't seen it in years. It was a gift from my grandfather, a trinket box he brought back from some exotic trip. I'd forgotten all about it. My heart hammered. I walked towards it, my hand trembling as I reached for the lid. It wasn't locked. I lifted it slowly, the old wood creaking softly. Inside, nestled on a faded velvet lining, was a watch. It wasn't just any watch. It was an antique, a pocket watch, silver-plated and intricately engraved with swirling patterns that seemed to shift and dance in the dim light. I hadn't touched it since my grandfather died. He'd always said it was special, a family heirloom, but I dismissed it as sentimental value. Now, looking at its gleaming surface, its delicate hands frozen at an unknown time, I felt a deep, unsettling certainty. This was the watch. But how? How could my future self have known it was here? How could he have known I'd forgotten it? Unless he himself had placed it there, perhaps after he had already become my future self, knowing I would eventually need to find it. The thought sent a shiver down my spine. The implications were staggering. I carefully picked up the watch. It was heavier than it looked, solid and cold in my palm. The engraving wasn't just decorative. It was a complex series of symbols, almost like a language I couldn't understand. There was a small, almost invisible button on its side, just like the pen. Pressed it. Nothing. No light, no sound. It was just a beautiful old pocket watch. But the note said, "It's the key." A key to what? A key to survival? A key to understanding? My mind raced. The tracker was neutralized. The watch was found. The next step was a complete unknown, a void of terrifying possibilities. I was out of time. I had to assume they were close. Very close. The silence of my house was no longer comforting. It was suffocating, pregnant with anticipation. It was the silence before the storm, and I was standing right in its path. The silence of my house was no longer comforting. It was suffocating, pregnant with anticipation. It was the silence before the storm, and I was standing right in its path. My heart hammered against my ribs, a frantic drumbeat echoing the terror that had finally caught up to me. Every creak of the old house, every rustle of leaves outside, sounded like an approaching predator. I was frozen, my mind racing through 1,000 futile possibilities, but one thought cut through the noise. I couldn't just stand here. My future self hadn't sent me this package just to watch me get caught. There had to be an answer, a way out, something I was missing. My eyes darted to the package, still lying on the coffee table where I'd frantically dumped its contents. The crumpled note. I snatched it up, my fingers trembling as I reread the familiar, unsettling words. They are coming. They are after what you have, not what you know. The key is in the past. Remember the lighthouse. Protect the truth. Save yourself. The key is in the past. Remember the lighthouse. The words resonated, not with immediate understanding, but with a strange, nostalgic echo. The lighthouse. It wasn't just a random landmark. It was our landmark. A flood of memories long buried under the mundane layers of adulthood burst forth. David, my best friend from childhood. We were inseparable, two halves of a whole, bound by an insatiable curiosity and a shared love for secrets. Our world revolved around the old, abandoned lighthouse on the edge of town, perched precariously on a rocky outcrop overlooking the churning Atlantic. To everyone else, it was a decaying relic, a dangerous ruin. To us, it was a fortress, a laboratory, a library of untold adventures. We spent countless afternoons there, scrambling over crumbling stone, exploring every dusty nook and cranny. We imagined ourselves as intrepid explorers, spies, or treasure hunters. Our most cherished game, our most elaborate secret, was our obsession with codes. We devoured books on cryptography, from simple substitution ciphers to the more complex Vigenère and Playfair ciphers. We created our own, a system so intricate, so convoluted, we were convinced no one else in the world could ever crack it. It started with a simple idea. Replace each letter with a number, then shift the numbers based on a keyword. But we quickly grew bored with that. We needed something more robust, something truly unyielding. David, with his knack for patterns and his almost encyclopedic memory, suggested using an entire book as the key. Not just any book, but a specific obscure one we'd found gathering dust in the lighthouse's forgotten library. Maritime legends of the northeast coast. A thick leather-bound tome filled with forgotten local folklore, shipwrecks, and legends. It was perfect. Obscure enough that no one would ever stumble upon it, yet filled with enough text to provide an endless source of key material. Our method was painstaking. Each letter of our message corresponded to a specific word on a specific page of that book. The first letter of the message would be encoded using the first letter of the first word on page 1, the second letter of the message using the second letter of the second word on page 1, and so on, spiraling through the book's text in a pattern only we understood. It was a monstrous, beautiful creation, a testament to our youthful ingenuity and our shared conviction that the world was full of secrets waiting to be unlocked. We even had a special compartment, a loose stone in the lighthouse's base, where we kept our key book, as we called it, along with a few of our coded messages and a tattered map to imaginary treasures. The memory was so vivid, I could almost smell the salty air, feel the rough stone under my fingertips. The key book. It wasn't just a childhood relic. It was the literal key to a cipher. And my future self, knowing they would be listening, knowing I couldn't be trusted with direct information, had sent me a coded message. The note wasn't just a warning. It was the first piece of the puzzle, directing me to the method of decryption. My breath hitched. They are after what you have, not what you know. This package, this future technology. My future self knew that any direct communication, any explicit instructions would be intercepted. So they'd encoded it, using a cipher only I would remember, a cipher tied to a place only I would connect with the past. The lighthouse. A cold shiver ran down my spine, but it wasn't entirely from fear. It was the thrill of a puzzle falling into place, a horrifying life or death puzzle. My future self hadn't just predicted danger, they had provided the means to fight back, to understand. But that meant I needed the key book. And the key book was at the lighthouse. The sudden realization brought with it a fresh wave of panic, immediately followed by a surge of desperate resolve. I couldn't stay here. I had to get to that lighthouse. Now, a faint scraping sound from the front of the house jolted me back to the present, sharper than any dream. It was subtle, almost imperceptible, but in the suffocating silence, it was as loud as a gunshot. Someone was at my front door. Not knocking, not ringing, scraping, like a lockpick, or someone trying to force a tool into the mechanism. My blood ran cold. They weren't just close, they were here. My eyes frantically scanned the room, the back door. It was my only way out. I grabbed the future package, stuffing the note and the strange device back inside, clutching it to my chest like a lifeline. My car keys. Where were my car keys? On the hook by the door. The front door. No, I couldn't go that way. Think, Michael, think. I remembered leaving them on the kitchen counter earlier. Yes, a tiny spark of hope flickered. I moved with the stealth of a cat, every muscle tensed, every nerve screaming. I crept through the living room, hugging the wall, my gaze fixed on the hallway leading to the kitchen. The scraping sound continued, growing more insistent. A soft click. My heart leaped into my throat. They were in. Or almost. I reached the kitchen, snatched the keys from the counter, and fumbled for the back door lock. My hands were shaking so violently I almost dropped them. The old deadbolt protested, squeaking loudly as I turned it. It sounded like a cannon shot in the silent house. From the front of the house, I heard a distinct thud, followed by a low guttural murmur. They were inside. Adrenaline surged through me. I yanked the door open, not caring about stealth anymore, and burst out into the cool night air. The backyard was dark, illuminated only by the faint glow of distant streetlights. I scrambled towards my car, parked just beyond the small patch of lawn. My hands were still shaking as I jammed the key into the ignition, turning it wildly. The engine coughed, sputtered, and then roared to life. I threw the car into reverse, tires spitting gravel as I peeled out of the driveway, not even bothering to close the back door of the house. As I sped down the street, my eyes flickered to my rearview mirror. A dark sedan, previously parked innocuously down the block, was now pulling out, its headlights flashing on. They were right behind me. Panic clawed at my throat, but beneath it, a desperate resolve solidified. I wasn't just running from them anymore. I was running towards the lighthouse, towards David, towards the key book, towards a forgotten piece of my past that now held the key to my future. The night was a blur of fear and desperate speed. The future package heavy on the passenger seat, a silent, urgent companion. I had to get there, before they caught me, before they understood what I was after, before they took everything. The car was a missile tearing through the inky blackness. Every curve of the deserted highway felt like a betrayal, every shadow a lurking threat. My heart hammered against my ribs, a frantic drum solo against the rising tide of pure, unadulterated panic. The speedometer needle flirted dangerously with its maximum, but it wasn't fast enough. Nothing was fast enough. My eyes darted from the road ahead to the rearview mirror, a constant paranoid dance. The future package, a silent, ominous passenger, vibrated slightly with the car's speed. Its contents still largely a mystery, yet its presence was the only thing anchoring me to this impossible reality. A bead of sweat trickled down my temple, cold despite the heat blasting from the vents. My hands gripped the steering wheel so tightly my knuckles were white and aching. This wasn't just about escape anymore. This was about a destination. A desperate gamble based on cryptic warnings from a version of myself I barely recognized. The note from my future self, the one I'd found tucked beneath the device, had been unsettlingly precise. When the chase begins, head to the old place. It's the only failsafe. They won't expect it. The old place. My grandfather's hunting cabin, deep in the forgotten woods of the Allegheny National Forest. A place so remote, so utterly isolated I hadn't visited it in years. It was perfect. Or so I prayed. Suddenly a flicker. Distant headlights appeared in my rearview mirror. A tiny, growing pinprick of light against the vast dark canvas. My breath hitched. I squeezed my eyes shut for a fraction of a second, then snapped them open, forcing myself to look again. They were still there. And they were gaining. My mind raced, cataloging every possible explanation. Another late-night driver? An off-duty patrol car? Or them? The insidious they my future self had warned me about. The shadowy entity that apparently held the power to unravel my entire existence. I pressed harder on the accelerator, the engine groaning in protest. The car swayed precariously on the winding road, the tires fighting for traction. The headlights behind me seemed to mock my efforts, growing brighter, closer. They were definitely following. There was no mistaking the deliberate, relentless pursuit. A cold dread seeped into my bones, a chilling certainty that my future self's warnings weren't just theoretical. They were happening. Now, I swerved off the main highway onto a smaller, unpaved road, barely wide enough for one car. Tree branches scraped against the car's sides, a symphony of scratching metal. Dust plumed up behind me, obscuring the view, but not enough. Through the swirling cloud, I could still see the relentless glow of their headlights, still following. They knew where I was going, or at least they knew I was going somewhere specific. Panic threatened to overwhelm me, a suffocating wave that tried to drag me under. But then, a flash of something else from the future package. Not a physical object, but a memory of a detail from the initial message. They track everything. Assume nothing is private. Your only advantage is their underestimation of your past. The old cabin. My past. It was a long shot, but it was my only shot. The road became a muddy track, barely navigable. My car bounced and shuddered, the suspension protesting with every dip and rut. The cabin was still miles away, deep in the heart of the forest. The air grew colder, thick with the scent of pine and damp earth. I could hear the faint, distant howl of a coyote, a lonely, mournful sound that echoed my own mounting despair. Finally, a break in the trees, a clearing, and there it was, silhouetted against the faintest hint of pre-dawn light, the dark, skeletal outline of my grandfather's cabin. It looked even more dilapidated than I remembered, a forgotten relic swallowed by the encroaching wilderness. Overgrown bushes clawed at its weathered walls, and the porch sagged precariously. It was perfect. It was also terrifying. I slammed on the brakes, the car skidding to a halt just shy of the cabin's porch. Before the dust could even settle, I was out, the future package clutched tightly in my left hand. My right hand fumbled with the car door, pulling it shut with a desperate slam. The sound seemed deafening in the sudden silence of the forest. I spun around, my eyes scanning the tree line, my ears straining for any sound. Nothing. Yet. But I knew they were coming. I could feel their presence, a chilling certainty that prickled the hairs on the back of my neck. I raced towards the cabin door, a heavy splintered slab of wood that hadn't seen a fresh coat of paint in decades. The lock was rusty, stubborn. My fingers trembled as I tried to insert the old brass key, a spare my grandfather had given me years ago, a key I'd kept out of sentimental habit, never imagining it would become my lifeline. The key scraped against the tumblers, refusing to turn. Frustration, sharp and agonizing, mixed with the growing terror. I could almost hear their engine now, a low thrumming sound getting closer, closer. Come on, come on. I whispered, my voice hoarse. I twisted the key with all my might, a desperate grunt escaping my lips. With a reluctant groan, the lock finally gave way. I burst inside, stumbling over the threshold, the stale, musty air of the forgotten cabin hitting me like a physical blow. The darkness was absolute, broken only by the faint sliver of light from the open doorway. I slammed the door shut behind me, plunging the cabin into utter blackness. My heart was a runaway train, threatening to burst from my chest. I leaned against the door, gasping for breath, trying to calm my frantic pulse. But there was no time. I could hear them now, unmistakably. The crunch of tires on the dirt track, the low rumble of an engine. They were here. My hands flew to the deadbolt, jamming it home. Then the chain lock, fumbling blindly in the dark. The cabin was old but sturdy, built for harsh winters and unexpected visitors. Could it withstand them? I had no idea. I stumbled deeper into the cabin, my hands outstretched, bumping against unseen furniture. The air was thick with the scent of pine needles, dust, and something else. Something faintly metallic, a scent I couldn't quite place. I needed light. My hand instinctively went to my pocket, pulling out my phone. The screen flashed, a blinding beacon in the oppressive darkness. I quickly turned on the flashlight function, painting a shaky beam across the cabin's interior. Dust motes danced in the light, suspended in the still air. Cobwebs draped from the ceiling like ghostly curtains. The old stone fireplace stood silent and cold, its hearth filled with dead ashes. My grandfather's worn armchair sat in a corner, covered by a faded sheet, a silent sentinel of a bygone era. Everything was exactly as he'd left it, a museum of memories. But my future self hadn't sent me here for nostalgia. The failsafe, the note had said. I scanned the room frantically, my flashlight beam jittering with the tremor in my hands. What was I looking for? What could possibly be here that would protect me from an unknown, relentless enemy? I remembered another line from the future self's initial message, a detail that now seemed incredibly significant. The package contains the key, but the cabin holds the lock. Look for the hidden compartment. Grandfather's secret. My grandfather had been a man of secrets, a quiet, resourceful man who'd always had a knack for tinkering, for building things. A hidden compartment, of course, but where? My eyes darted around the small living area. The fireplace? The old wooden desk in the corner? The floorboards? Suddenly, a sharp thump from outside the cabin. My head snapped towards the sound, the flashlight beam freezing. They were at the door. I heard a faint scraping sound, then a low murmur of voices. They weren't trying to break in yet, they were assessing, observing. My blood ran cold. They were methodical, patient, and that made them even more terrifying. I had seconds, maybe a minute at most. My gaze fell upon the mantel above the fireplace. It was made of rough-hewn oak, thick and solid. I remembered my grandfather sometimes tapping it, almost absently, when he was deep in thought. I rushed towards it, my heart pounding, my breath catching in my throat. I ran my hands along the underside of the mantel, feeling for any imperfection, any seam, any hidden latch. Nothing. Just rough wood and decades of dust. Desperate, I remembered another quirk of his. He often hid things behind books. My eyes flew to the small, built-in bookshelf beside the fireplace. A few old, leather-bound books, forgotten classics, sat there. I pulled them out, one by one, sending a cascade of dust motes into the air. Behind the last book, an old, tattered copy of Moby Dick that my grandfather had read countless times. I felt it. A small, almost imperceptible groove in the wood paneling. My finger traced it, revealing a faint outline. A tiny, almost invisible button was nestled within the groove. My finger hovered over it, hesitating for just a split second. What would happen when I pressed it? Was this truly the failsafe? Or was it another trap? But the sound of a heavy thump against the cabin door, louder this time, followed by the distinct creak of wood protesting, spurred me into action. They were losing their patience. I pressed the button. With a soft, almost inaudible click, a section of the wall beside the fireplace, disguised as part of the shelving, slid inward a few inches, then outward, revealing a dark, narrow recess. My flashlight beam pierced the darkness, revealing a small metal box nestled within. It was old, tarnished, but surprisingly heavy. This had to be it. My hands reached in, pulling the box out. It was a sturdy steel strongbox about the size of a shoebox. No visible lock, no obvious way to open it. My eyes darted back to the future package, which I had placed on the dusty table. The package contains the key, but the cabin holds the lock. I tore at the brown paper, ripping it open completely. Inside, nestled amongst the other mysterious components I hadn't yet deciphered, was a single, intricately designed key. It wasn't a standard house key or even a car key. It was an ornate, almost antique-looking key, with a complex steampunk-esque design. I grabbed the key, my fingers trembling with anticipation and dread. My gaze fell back to the strongbox. I ran my fingers over its surface, searching for a keyhole. And there it was, hidden beneath a small sliding panel on the side, almost invisible. Just as I inserted the key, the cabin door shuddered violently, a loud crack echoing through the small space. A splintered section of wood flew inward, landing with a soft thud on the floor. They were breaking through. I had moments, maybe less. With another desperate grunt, I turned the key. The strongbox clicked open with a satisfying metallic snick. I threw open the lid, my flashlight beam plunging into its depths. Inside, nestled on a bed of faded velvet, was not what I expected. No weapons, no money, no cryptic notes. Instead, there was a single sleek silver pistol. But it wasn't just any pistol. It was unlike any firearm I had ever seen, its design futuristic, almost alien. And beside it, a small black rectangular device, glowing with a faint pulsing blue light. It looked like a remote control but far more advanced, with no visible buttons, just a smooth, dark surface. And then I saw the final item. Tucked beneath the pistol, almost hidden, was another note from my future self. It was brief, scrawled in the same frantic handwriting as the first. I snatched it up, my eyes devouring the words as the sounds of the door splintering grew louder, closer. This, the note read, is not for defense. It's for rewriting, for stopping them before they start. The device is the trigger. The pistol is the reset. Before I could even begin to process the chilling implications of those words, the cabin door exploded inward, ripped from its hinges with a deafening crash. A dark figure lunged into the opening, silhouetted against the pale pre-dawn light, its face obscured. My heart seized in my chest. They were here, and I was out of time. The figure lunged. My mind screamed, but my body moved on instinct. I dove to the side, rolling clumsily behind the overturned table that had served as my makeshift command center. The impact of the figure hitting where I'd been a split second before echoed like a thunderclap. It wasn't just one person. There was a second shadow, then a third, pouring into the small cabin, their movements swift, practiced, terrifyingly coordinated. My heart hammered against my ribs, a frantic drumbeat against the silence of the pre-dawn woods, now shattered by the chaotic invasion of my last sanctuary. I scrambled, desperately searching for anything to defend myself. My fingers brushed against the cold metal of the antique fireplace, poker-eyed propped against the wall. It was flimsy, hardly a weapon against trained attackers, but it was something. I gripped it, the rough iron digging into my palm. "He's here," a guttural voice barked, the sound muffled but menacing. It was a man's voice, deep and gravelly like stones grinding together. "Check the back," another commanded, sharper, more urgent. My blood ran cold. They knew I was here. They hadn't just stumbled upon the cabin, they had tracked me. The package. My future self's warning. It was all real. I pressed myself flat against the floor, trying to make myself invisible in the dim light filtering through the shattered doorway. The air was thick with the scent of pine and something acrid, metallic, the smell of fear, perhaps, or the lingering scent of whatever explosive device they'd used on the door. My eyes darted around the cabin, searching for an escape. The back window. It was small, but maybe, just maybe, I could squeeze through. But they were already moving. Heavy boots thudded across the wooden floorboards. I heard the splintering sound of furniture being tossed aside, the clatter of objects as they systematically swept through the small space. I could feel the vibrations through the floor. They were close. Too close. I peered cautiously over the edge of the overturned table. A hulking silhouette stood just feet away, its head swiveling, scanning the room. Even in the gloom, I could discern the outline of a tactical vest, something bulky at its hip. A weapon, undoubtedly. My poker felt like a twig against an oak tree. My gaze fell upon the small metallic device from the package, still lying on the floor where I dropped it in my haste. It pulsed faintly, a soft, almost imperceptible blue light. The key, my future self had called it. But a key to what? And how could it help me now? As the large figure turned its back to me, moving deeper into the cabin, I saw my chance. I clenched the poker, a desperate plan forming in my mind. I wouldn't fight them directly. I couldn't, but I could create a diversion. With a surge of adrenaline, I lunged forward, not at the figure, but towards a stack of old firewood near the fireplace. I swung the poker like a baseball bat, sending logs scattering with a loud crash. The sound was deafening in the sudden quiet. "Over there!" the gravelly voice yelled, instantly redirecting the intruder's attention. It worked. The hulking figure spun around, its eyes narrowing on the sound. In that split second of confusion, I bolted. I didn't run for the back window. I ran for the shattered doorway, the one they had just entered through. It was counterintuitive, but it was my only shot. They expected me to hide, to go deeper into the cabin. They wouldn't expect me to run towards them. I burst through the doorway, shards of wood raining down around me. The cold morning air hit my face, sharp and invigorating. I didn't stop to look back. I plunged into the dense woods surrounding the cabin, weaving between trees, branches whipping at my face and clothes. My lungs burned, my legs ached, but the fear of what would happen if they caught me propelled me forward. "He's fleeing. Perimeter now." The shouts echoed behind me, closer than I would have liked. They were fast, alarmingly fast. I heard the rustle of leaves, the snap of twigs, indicating they were already in pursuit. I pushed harder, remembering the terrain I'd scouted earlier. There was a small, rocky ravine about a quarter-mile north of the cabin, an almost invisible fissure in the landscape, overgrown with thick brush. It wasn't much, but it might offer a temporary hiding spot, a chance to catch my breath and think. As I ran, my mind raced. Who are these people? What do they want? The package. It held the answers, but I'd abandoned it in my desperate escape. No, wait. I hadn't. In the chaos, I must have instinctively grabbed something. My hand went to my pocket. There, nestled against my leg, was the small metallic device. The key. I must have scooped it up when I scrambled for the poker. A small, desperate victory. The woods were a maze in the dim light. I stumbled, caught myself, and kept going. The sounds of pursuit were relentless, a symphony of heavy breathing and snapping undergrowth. They were coordinated, fanning out, trying to encircle me. I could hear them calling to each other, low-clipped phrases I couldn't quite make out. It was chillingly professional. I reached the edge of the ravine, a sudden drop-off concealed by thick brambles and low-hanging branches. I didn't hesitate. I plunged down the steep embankment, sliding and tumbling, scraping my hands and knees on the sharp rocks and thorny bushes. The pain was a dull throb compared to the terror that fueled my flight. I landed hard at the bottom, gasping for air, the metallic taste of blood in my mouth. The ravine floor was narrow, barely wide enough for me to crouch. Above, I could hear their footsteps pause. "He went down here," one voice yelled, closer now. "Fan out. Don't let him get past," another commanded. I pressed myself against the damp earth, trying to blend into the shadows, my breathing ragged. My heart was still pounding, but a sliver of adrenaline-fueled clarity cut through the panic. I had to think. I had to use what my future self had given me. I pulled the metallic device from my pocket. It still pulsed with that soft blue light. It was smooth, cool to the touch, with no discernible buttons or interfaces, just a single, small, almost invisible etched symbol on one side. A stylized double helix like a twisted ladder. I remembered the note. "This is the key. It will show you the truth. Don't let them have it." The truth. What truth? And how did this device reveal it? I turned it over in my hand, examining it closely. Felt inert yet alive. It wasn't a weapon. It wasn't a communication device in any obvious sense. Then a thought struck me. The other items in the package. The small vial of clear liquid. The folded map with the red X. The encrypted journal. My future self hadn't just sent me a warning. They'd sent me a survival kit, a puzzle, a guide. I heard a rustle directly above me. A shadow fell across the ravine floor. I froze, my breath catching in my throat. I could see the edge of a heavy boot, then the fabric of tactical pants. "I see him." My blood ran cold. This was it. But then a sharp whistle cut through the air, followed by a series of rapid, urgent shouts. The boot disappeared. The shadow lifted. Confusion rippled through the voices above. "What's happening? Hold position. Orders are changing. Something's coming from the east." I risked a peek. The figures above me were no longer focused on the ravine. They were looking eastward into the deeper woods, their postures tense, alert. I could hear a distant, faint thrumming sound growing steadily louder. It was mechanical, like a large drone or a small helicopter. Another group? Or a rival faction? My future self's warning had mentioned them, but it hadn't specified who. Was I caught in the middle of a war I didn't even know existed? The thrumming grew into a roar. Trees rustled violently in the distance. Then a blinding searchlight cut through the pre-dawn gloom, sweeping across the forest canopy, illuminating the ravine for a terrifying second before passing over. I ducked back down, heart pounding. Fall back! Fall back! The gravelly voice I'd heard earlier now sounded panicked. We're compromised. Extraction point now? The sounds of pursuit began to recede, replaced by the frantic shouts of the intruders as they regrouped and withdrew. The thrumming sound intensified, now directly overhead, creating a powerful downdraft that whipped leaves and dust around me. I risked another look. A massive, sleek black drone, unlike anything I had ever seen, hovered silently above the trees, its powerful rotor blades churning the air. Below it, the figures who had chased me were scrambling, disappearing into the woods, clearly in full retreat. It was as if they were being hunted themselves. My mind reeled. This wasn't just a simple break-in. This was a sophisticated operation, involving multiple advanced parties. My future self hadn't just warned me about an enemy, but about a complex, dangerous conflict. The drone remained for only a few more seconds, its searchlight sweeping the area one last time, before it tilted slightly and shot off into the eastern sky, vanishing as quickly as it had appeared. The silence that followed was deafening, punctuated only by my own ragged breathing and the distant, fading sounds of the retreating intruders. I was safe for now, but the cabin was compromised. My car was likely compromised. I was deep in the woods, injured, alone, and with only a single cryptic device for my future self. I looked at the device again, its blue light pulsing steadily, almost reassuringly in my palm. My future self had known this would happen. Had they sent this drone? Or was this another player entirely? The note from the package flashed in my mind. Trust no one. They are everywhere. Follow the breadcrumbs. Breadcrumbs. The map. The coordinates. The journal. I was no longer just running from an unknown threat. I was in the middle of it. And the first breadcrumb, the first step, had to be to understand what this small glowing device truly was. It was my only link to the future, my only hope. I had to get to the location on the map. It was the next instruction. It was my only choice. But first, I needed to get out of this ravine and figure out if anyone was still watching. The silence was unnerving. Too unnerving. It felt like the calm before an even bigger storm. I was a pawn in a game I didn't understand, and my future self was the only one who had given me the rulebook. And I had only just started reading. The silence in my apartment stretched, thick and suffocating, making every creak of the floorboard sound like a gunshot. My heart hammered against my ribs, a frantic drumbeat against the unsettling quiet. I paced, a caged animal, my mind replaying the image of the car, the glint of the camera lens. They were watching. They were always watching. The future me had known this. He hadn't just sent me a warning. He'd sent me a manual for survival, a guide for a game I hadn't even known I was playing until now. I needed to go back to the journal. Everything else was a distraction, a trap. This book, this bizarre testament from another timeline, was my only lifeline. I snatched it from the coffee table, my fingers trembling as I flipped through the pages. The cryptic entries, the hurried handwriting, the strange symbols. It all seemed to mock me. I'd read it, reread it, but had I truly understood it? My future self had expected me to be watched, to be hunted. So the instructions, the true instructions, couldn't be obvious. They had to be hidden, camouflaged within the chaos. I started from the beginning again, my eyes scanning every detail, every smudge, every stray mark. I wasn't looking for a story anymore. I was looking for a pattern, a code, a secret language between two versions of the same man. Hours bled into one another. The city outside dimmed, then brightened with the first tentative rays of dawn. My apartment, usually a haven, now felt like a glass cage. I pulled the blinds shut, the flimsy fabric doing little to quell the gnawing paranoia. Then a thought struck me, an idea so simple and so obvious that it felt like a punch to the gut. The journal wasn't the only thing my future self had sent. There was the package itself, the box, the shipping label. Could the message be hidden there? My future self was meticulous, precise. He wouldn't leave anything to chance. I scrambled to the closet, rummaging through the pile of discarded boxes until my fingers closed around the familiar cardboard. It was a standard shipping box, nothing remarkable. I peeled off the label, examining the adhesive side, the printed side. Nothing, just tracking numbers and my address. But then, as I held it up to the dim light filtering through the blinds, I noticed it. On the inside flap of the box where the cardboard folds met, there were faint indentations. Not printed, not written, but pressed into the cardboard itself. A series of numbers almost imperceptible against the brown background, as if etched with a dull pencil point. 8-17-3, 12-4-9, 21-1-5. October 1st, 34. My heart began to pound with a renewed, desperate rhythm. This was it. This had to be it. But what did they mean? Page numbers? Line numbers? Word counts? I raced back to the journal, clutching the box flap in one hand, the journal in the other. I tried the simplest interpretation first. Page, line, word. Page 8, line 17, word 3. My finger traced the lines, my eyes scanning the words. The. Page 12, line 4, word 9. Meridian. Page 21, line 1, word 5. Building. Page 34, line 10, word 1. Level. I stopped, holding my breath. The Meridian building level. It was forming a coherent phrase. A location. I continued, my hands shaking with a mixture of fear and exhilaration. Page 45, line 7, word 2. 12. Page 58, line 11, word 6. East. Page 63, line 2, word 4. Vent. Page 70, line 15, word 8. Midnight. Page 79, line 3, word 1. Tonight. My blood ran cold, then surged through my veins. The Meridian building. Level 12. East vent. Midnight. Tonight. The words echoed in my mind, stark and terrifying. Tonight. Not tomorrow, not next week. Tonight. And midnight was only a few hours away. The Meridian building was one of the tallest skyscrapers downtown. A sleek, modern structure of glass and steel. I'd walked past it countless times, never imagining it held any significance beyond its imposing architecture. And an east vent on level 12? What could possibly be there? What was so important that my future self had gone to such painstaking lengths to hide this message, knowing I would be under surveillance? This wasn't a suggestion, it was an order. An urgent, desperate plea from a future that was rapidly becoming my present. My future self hadn't just warned me. He was guiding me, step by terrifying step, through a minefield. And the next step was into the heart of downtown, into the Meridian building, under the cover of darkness. Panic threatened to overwhelm me. How was I supposed to get there? They were watching me. Every move, every decision. I couldn't just walk out the door and hail a cab. That would be a dead giveaway. I needed a plan. Something subtle. Something that looked normal. I forced myself to breathe, to think. My future self had known this too. There had to be a way. I scanned the journal again, frantically searching for any other hints, any other instructions about evasion. On page 85, a single underlined sentence caught my eye, surrounded by what I'd previously dismissed as meaningless doodles. When the cage tightens, blend with the flock. Familiar paths are the safest, but never twice the same way. Blend with the flock. Familiar paths. My routine. I usually went for a late evening run around the park a few blocks away. It was predictable, mundane. If I stuck to my routine, they might lower their guard or at least expect me to return. But never twice the same way. That meant I had to deviate subtly, untraceably. I needed to look like I was just going for my run. I changed into my running clothes, my hands steady now, fueled by a cold, calculating resolve. Fear was still a bitter taste in my mouth, but it was now mixed with a strange, fierce determination. I wasn't just a pawn anymore, I was an active player. I grabbed my phone, my headphones, and a small, nondescript backpack. A backpack I usually took on longer runs, containing a water bottle and a light jacket. Tonight it would carry something else. I glanced around my apartment, a sudden wave of detachment washing over me. Would I ever see it again? I pushed the thought away. Focus. As I approached the front door, I hesitated. The feeling of being watched was palpable, a phantom weight on my shoulders. I took a deep breath, plastered a neutral expression on my face, and opened the door. The hallway was empty. The stairwell too. I took the stairs, not wanting to risk the elevator, its mirrored walls and camera lenses. Stepping out onto the street, the cool night air hit me. I put on my headphones, playing a random upbeat playlist, trying to appear completely oblivious. I started my usual jogging route towards the park, forcing my pace to be steady, rhythmic. Out of the corner of my eye, I saw it. The same dark sedan parked a block down, lights off. A figure in the driver's seat. They were there. They were watching. My heart pounded, but I kept my pace, my eyes fixed straight ahead. I ran past the park entrance, pretending to be lost in my music, then subtly veered off into a less used side street. This wasn't my usual route. I picked up my pace, darting through alleyways, cutting across empty parking lots, using every turn, every shadow to try and lose them. I didn't look back, I couldn't afford to. I could just feel their presence, a relentless shadow dogging my steps. I emerged onto a bustling street, blending into a small crowd of late-night pedestrians. It was risky, but it was my best bet. I kept moving, weaving through people, my eyes constantly scanning for any sign of recognition, any familiar face. Finally, I saw it, the towering, illuminated silhouette of the Meridian building, piercing the night sky. It looked even more imposing up close, a fortress of secrets. I checked my watch. 11:40 p.m. I had 20 minutes. I circled the building, looking for any entrance, any way in. The main lobby was locked, dark, and clearly monitored by cameras. Service entrances were likely locked and alarmed. My future self wouldn't have sent me here without a way in. There had to be another clue. I remembered the journal again, the specific phrase. The old access, long forgotten beneath the ivy's embrace. Ivy. I scanned the building's exterior. There was a patch of overgrown ivy clinging to the back wall, near the loading docks, partially obscuring a small, rusted metal door. It looked disused, almost swallowed by the foliage. Hope surged. I approached cautiously, pulling away the thick vines. The door was heavy, solid, but the latch was old, rusted. With a grunt, I managed to force it open, the screech of metal echoing in the silent alley. I slipped inside, closing the door behind me, plunging myself into absolute darkness. The air was thick with the smell of dust and disuse. I pulled out my phone, using its flashlight to navigate. I was in a service corridor, narrow and winding, leading deeper into the building's guts. My footsteps echoed eerily. I passed dusty storage rooms, forgotten utility closets. The silence was absolute, broken only by the frantic beat of my own heart. I found a stairwell, ascending floor after floor, my legs burning, until I reached the 12th floor. The hallway was wide, carpeted, and pristine, a stark contrast to the grimy service areas below. It was an executive floor, clearly. Empty offices lined the corridor, their glass doors reflecting my anxious face. I walked slowly, trying to locate the east vent. I checked the emergency exit signs, orienting myself. East, and there it was, a large rectangular vent cover, high on the wall, near the ceiling. It was industrial grade, bolted shut, seemingly part of the building's ventilation system. It looked completely inaccessible, but as I drew closer, my flashlight beam sweeping over it, I noticed something. Etched faintly into the metal, right next to the vent grill, was a small familiar symbol, a stylized, interlocking double helix. It was a symbol I'd seen repeatedly in the journal, always next to dates or particularly cryptic entries. This wasn't just a vent. It was the vent. I reached up, my fingers brushing against the cold metal. It was smooth, unyielding. There was no handle, no obvious way to open it. My future self hadn't meant for me to break in. He had meant for me to find something, or hear something. I pressed my ear against the cold metal, straining to listen. First, nothing. Just the high-pitched whine of my own blood rushing in my ears. Then, faint, almost imperceptible, I heard it. A rhythmic, distant thump-thump-thump. Like a slow, steady pulse. It wasn't coming from the building's mechanics. It was too organic, too deliberate. And then a whisper, so faint it could have been a trick of the mind, barely audible through the thick metal. A voice, hoarse and strained, calling my name. Michael. Michael. My breath hitched, a cold knot tightening in my stomach. I pressed my ear harder against the cold metal, my heart hammering against my ribs. Was it an echo? A trick of the air currents in the vents? The building was old, full of strange groans and creaks, but this felt different. It was too direct, too personal. Hello. I whispered back, my voice barely audible even to myself. The silence that followed was deafening, punctuated only by my own ragged breathing. I started to tell myself I was imagining things. The stress, the package, the impossible letter. It was all getting to me. My mind was playing tricks. Then it came again. Clearer this time, though still a rasp, a struggle. Michael, it's me. My blood ran cold. Me? Who was me? The only me that made any sense in this impossible scenario was the Michael who had sent the package. My future self. But how? And why was he behind the wall? Panic, raw and unadulterated, began to claw at my throat. I stumbled back, my eyes scanning the innocuous stretch of wall, the beige paint, the small scuff marks near the floor. It looked solid, unyielding, but a voice was coming from inside it. My voice. Who is this? I demanded, my voice trembling despite my best efforts to control it. My hands were already clammy, a fine sheen of sweat breaking out on my forehead. A weak cough, then a pained groan. You know who it is. Listen, you have to get me out. The urgency in that strained voice was undeniable. It wasn't a hallucination. It wasn't a prank. This was real. My future self, the one who had sent the dire warnings, was trapped somehow behind the very wall of my own apartment. The absurdity of it was almost comical, if it weren't so terrifying. How are you in there? I stammered, my mind racing, trying to grasp at any logical explanation. There wasn't one. Nothing in my understanding of reality could explain this. No time, the voice rasped, each word a visible effort. He's coming. You need to find the panel. Behind the old radiator. My gaze shot to the far wall, where a decommissioned antique cast iron radiator sat, cold and heavy, painted over countless times. It was a relic from the building's original construction, too inefficient to be used but too much trouble to remove. I'd always found it an interesting architectural detail, a nod to the building's past. Now it was a focal point of my absolute horror. I scrambled towards it, my hands running along its fluted surface, then down the wall behind it. The paint was thick, uneven, but as my fingers probed, I felt a faint seam, a subtle irregularity in the plaster, just above the floorboards, hidden by the bulk of the radiator. It was almost imperceptible, expertly concealed. I feel something, I whispered, my voice tight with adrenaline. A seam. Is this it? Yes, came the weak reply. There's a release. A latch. Top right. Near the pipe, press hard. I fumbled in the cramped space, my fingers brushing against the cold, dusty pipes leading into the radiator. My heart pounded like a drum against my ribs. What was I about to uncover? What horrors lay behind this hidden panel? The package, the warnings, the cryptic notes. It all suddenly converged into this one terrifying moment. My fingers found a small, almost flesh indentation. I pressed hard, feeling a stiff resistance, then a faint click. A soft groan echoed from behind the wall as the seam I'd felt widen fractionally. It moved, I exclaimed, a mix of fear and exhilaration surging through me. Good, the voice gasped. Now you need leverage. Something strong. The crowbar in the utility closet. The utility closet. Of course. I had a small toolkit in there, mostly for minor repairs. A crowbar seemed like overkill for an apartment, but my dad had given it to me when I moved in, insisting you never know when you'll need to pry something open. He had no idea how prophetic those words would become. I burst into the closet, grabbing the heavy steel crowbar. My hands were shaking so badly I almost dropped it. Running back, I wedged the flat end of the crowbar into the newly formed gap, just above the floor. I took a deep breath, braced my feet, and pulled. The old wood groaned, plaster cracked, and with a sickening shriek of tortured metal, a section of the wall, about 3 feet wide and 5 feet tall, lurched inwards at the top, then swung open like a heavy makeshift door. Dust billowed out, thick and choking, illuminated by the single overhead light in my living room. What I saw sent a wave of nausea crashing over me. It wasn't a hidden room, not exactly. It was a cramped, dark, concrete-lined shaft, barely wide enough for a person to stand upright. And at the bottom, slumped against the cold, rough wall, was a man. He was disheveled, his clothes torn and grimy, his face pale and streaked with dirt and what looked like dried blood. His hair was longer than mine, flecked with gray, and his eyes, though clouded with pain and exhaustion, were unmistakably mine. Older, wearier, but undeniably my own. It was him, my future self. He looked up at me, a ghost of a smile touching his bruised lips. Took you long enough, Michael. His voice was still a rasp, but stronger now. laced with a dark humor that was chillingly familiar. I stared aghast. What happened to you? My mind struggled to process the impossible sight before me. This wasn't some abstract warning. This was real, tangible, horrifying. He tried to shift, wincing, and a clattering sound echoed from the depths of the shaft. I saw then that one of his legs was twisted at an unnatural angle, and a crude splint was fashioned around his arm. He was badly injured. Long story, he muttered, his eyes flickering towards the opening I had created. But we don't have time for it now. He'll be here. The package. Did you get it? Yes, I managed, my voice barely a whisper. The package. The warnings. You sent them. Good, he said, a breath of relief escaping him. Then you know what's at stake. But there's more. The real threat. It's not just the package. It's the network. The organization. Organization. I repeated, my gaze darting around the small, grimy space he was trapped in. It was like a forgotten service shaft, a vertical tunnel running through the building's core. How had he even gotten in there? They're everywhere, Michael, he whispered, his eyes wide with a desperate urgency. They've been watching you. Watching us. Ever since I opened the first package. The first package? I frowned. What are you talking about? I just got a package from you. He shook his head slowly, pain etched on his face. No, not the one I sent. The other one. The one that started all this. The one from him. My blood ran cold again. Him. This was getting more convoluted and terrifying by the second. My future self was trapped, injured, and talking about a mysterious organization, and another him who sent a first package that started everything. Who is him? I demanded, my mind reeling. What first package? He tried to push himself up, grunting in pain. The one with the device. The data drive. It was disguised, Michael. A gift, they said. From an old friend. But it was a trap. A lure. A device? A data drive? I thought back to the package I had received. It contained the letter, the compass, the key, the photo. No device. No data drive. My package didn't have anything like that, I said, confused. It had a letter, a key, a compass, and a picture. Future Michael's eyes widened fractionally. No, that's not right. The package I sent back. It was supposed to contain a warning about the real package. The one you received earlier. Before my package even arrived. Think, Michael. Has anything else unusual arrived recently? I racked my brain. Nothing. Just the regular mail, bills, junk mail. And then a flicker. A memory vague and almost forgotten. A small, nondescript padded envelope, delivered a few weeks ago. No return address, just my name. I'd assumed it was some kind of promotional item, or maybe a forgotten online order. I hadn't even opened it. It was still sitting on my desk, under a stack of old magazines. My future self must have seen the dawning realization in my eyes. The brown envelope, he rasped. Small. Undistinguished. You probably just tossed it aside. Thought nothing of it. It's still on my desk, I whispered, my voice barely audible. A cold dread began to spread through me, chilling me to the bone. I hadn't opened it. I hadn't even thought about it since it arrived. Good, he said, a desperate urgency in his tone. Don't open it. Whatever you do, do not open it. It's a tracking device, a beacon, and it's how they found me. It's how they'll find you. He struggled again, trying to pull himself up, his face contorted in pain. They're coming for it, Michael. For the device. They know it's here. I tried to warn you, tried to send you back a message, but they intercepted it. They twisted it. That's why I'm here. They caught me trying to send the package, trying to undo what I'd done. They caught you. I felt a surge of terror. Who are they? The Kronos Collective, he breathed, his eyes wide and haunted. They control the flow of information, the threads of time. They manipulate events from the shadows. And they want what's in that package. They want to ensure their future remains undisturbed. My interference, it broke their timeline. And now they're fixing it. The Kronos Collective. The name sounded like something out of a bad science fiction novel. But the man before me, my future self, was bleeding, broken, and utterly terrified. This was no fiction. We don't have much time, he urged, his voice growing weaker. You need to get the device out of here. Far away. Somewhere they can't trace it. And then you need to destroy it. Completely. Don't let them get their hands on it. It's too dangerous. My mind raced. The brown envelope. The device. The Chronos Collective. This was all so much more than a simple package. It was a conspiracy, a desperate struggle across time. But what about you? I asked, my voice cracking. I can't just leave you here. He gave a weak, resigned smile. I'm already gone, Michael. This is just the echo. The last gasp. My purpose was to warn you, to give you a chance. You have to escape. You have to save yourself. Save us. A distant siren wailed, growing louder, closer. Not a police siren, but something else. A deep, resonant hum that vibrated through the very structure of the building. It sounded like a massive, powerful vehicle. Future Michael's eyes darted towards the sound, fear flashing across his face. They're here, he gasped, his voice now barely a whisper. Go. Take the device. Don't let them catch you with it. He tried to push something into my hand, a small, cold object, metallic and smooth. My fingers closed around it instinctively. It was a single tarnished silver coin. A reminder, he whispered, his eyes glazing over, of what you're fighting for, of what you could lose. Now go, Michael. Run. The humming grew into a deafening roar, shaking the apartment. I heard footsteps, heavy and deliberate, thudding up the stairs, heading straight for my floor. There was no time to ask more questions, no time to help him. My future self, broken and bleeding, was telling me to abandon him. He was sacrificing himself. I looked at him one last time, his eyes pleading, urging me to flee. The coin felt heavy in my hand. I scrambled back, my eyes darting between the trapped man and the approaching footsteps. I had to make a choice, and that choice would determine everything. My mind screamed, flee. His eyes, his desperate plea, echoed louder than the approaching footsteps. Self-preservation, a primal instinct, seized me. I clutched the coin, its cold metal a stark contrast to the sudden heat of adrenaline flooding my veins. I didn't want to leave him, but his message was undeniable. I had to go. I turned, not looking back, and scrambled away from the crumbling wall, keeping low, moving with the frantic silence of a cornered animal. My breath hitched in my throat, each gasp a potential betrayer. I could hear the footsteps growing louder, closer now, accompanied by the low murmur of voices. They weren't just one person. There were several. I spotted a gap in a stack of corroded metal barrels, a small alcove barely large enough to conceal me. I dove in, pressing my body against the cold, grimy metal, pulling an old tarp over myself like a shroud. My heart hammered against my ribs, a drumbeat of terror. I peered through a rust-eaten hole, my vision narrowed to a sliver of the scene I'd just fled. 3 figures emerged from the shadows, their silhouettes stark against the dim light filtering from a distant, broken window. They were dressed in dark, utilitarian clothing, no visible insignia, but their movements were precise, coordinated. They weren't random thugs. They were professionals. The air around them seemed to thicken with unspoken authority, a chilling sense of purpose. They moved directly to the trapped man. One of them, taller than the others, knelt, examining the debris that held him. There was no conversation, no shouted commands, just efficient, silent assessment. My blood ran cold as I watched. The man I tried to help, the man who'd warned me, looked up at them, his face a mask of weary resignation. He didn't struggle. He didn't even speak. It was as if he had expected them, as if this was merely the next inevitable step in a long, painful journey. The tallest figure spoke, his voice a low rumble, too indistinct for me to make out the words, but the tone was flat, devoid of emotion. The trapped man simply nodded. Then, with a sudden, synchronized effort, the other 2 began to carefully, almost surgically, remove the rubble pinning him. It wasn't a rescue, it was an extraction. They were not trying to hurt him, but they certainly weren't showing any compassion either. They were retrieving an asset. As they pulled the last heavy slab away, freeing his leg, the trapped man turned his head, his gaze sweeping across the dark, cavernous space. For a fleeting second, his eyes locked onto my hiding spot. I froze, my breath caught in my throat. Did he see me? Or was it a final silent plea, a confirmation of his earlier warning? His expression was unreadable, a mixture of sorrow and a strange, profound understanding. Then, the tallest figure placed a firm hand on his shoulder, guiding him to his feet. The man limped, but he moved, a prisoner led away without a struggle. They disappeared back into the shadows from which they came. their footsteps fading, leaving behind only the echoing silence and the lingering chill of their presence. I stayed hidden, rigid, listening for what felt like an eternity. Only when I was absolutely certain they were gone did I dare to move slowly, carefully, my muscles aching from tension. My hand still clutched the coin. I pulled it out, bringing it closer to my eyes in the gloom. It wasn't just metal anymore. It was a lifeline, a message. I had only glanced at it before, but now I studied it with desperate intensity. One side was embossed with a stylized symbol I didn't recognize, a complex, interlocking geometric pattern, reminiscent of a knot or a circuit board, but organic, almost alien. On the reverse, etched with incredible precision, were a series of numbers and letters. It wasn't a date, not in the traditional sense. It was a sequence. October 27, 2024 3am, Sector 7. My mind raced. October 27, 2024. That was tomorrow. And Sector 7? What was Sector 7? Was it a location? A designation? The time 3 a.m. felt like a deadline, a critical window. The packaging from my future self had a similar, almost sterile alphanumeric quality to its labeling. This coin wasn't just a trinket. It was a key, a direct instruction, a warning. The trapped man, his desperate plea to flee, his knowing glance, and now this coin, it all converged. He hadn't just been a random victim. He was part of this. He was trying to give me this information, knowing he couldn't escape himself. He was sacrificing himself to ensure I received this message. The symbol on the coin, where had I seen it before? I racked my brain. It was vaguely familiar, like a half-forgotten dream. Then it hit me, a jolt of pure terror. The symbol wasn't on the package itself. It was on the device. The small, sleek, metallic device that had been inside the package, the one I hadn't yet fully understood. It was etched subtly onto its casing, almost invisible unless you knew to look for it. This wasn't a coincidence. This was a blueprint, a connection. The men who had just taken the trapped man away, they were looking for this information. Or perhaps they were looking for me. The realization slammed into me with the force of a physical blow. The them the future me had warned about, the shadowy organization trying to prevent me from changing my future, they weren't just a concept. They were real. They were here. They had agents, resources, and they were operating with chilling efficiency. The trapped man was either one of them, a defector, or another victim caught in their intricate web, trying to help me from within. This wasn't just about avoiding a bad personal future anymore. This was a full-blown conspiracy, a clandestine war being waged across time, or at least across the fabric of my own timeline. And I was now smack in the middle of it. The coin, this cryptic message, was a direct order. I had to be at Sector 7, wherever that was, at 3 a.m. tomorrow. But why? What was going to happen? And how could I possibly figure out where Sector 7 was in less than 24 hours? I pushed myself out of the hiding spot, my mind racing. The cold, metallic scent of the derelict warehouse suddenly felt oppressive. I couldn't stay here. I had to find a way to decipher Sector 7. I had to prepare. My future, and perhaps more than just my future, depended on it. I clutched the coin, its message burning into my palm, and began to move, not towards safety, but towards an unknown, terrifying destination. I didn't have much to go on. Sector 7 was too generic, too vague. But the coin was different. It wasn't just a simple piece of metal. It hummed with a faint, almost imperceptible energy, a vibration that resonated deep within my bones. I remembered the odd metallic sheen of the original package, the subtle, almost invisible etchings that covered its surface, like microscopic circuitry. What if the coin was a key, not just to a message but to a location? I spent the next several hours in a frantic, desperate research binge. I started with the coin itself, trying to find any unique markings, any corporate logo, any serial number. Nothing obvious. But then I remembered the faint, almost iridescent shimmer on the package's interior when I first opened it. It was gone now, absorbed by the device, but the memory sparked an idea. These weren't ordinary objects. They were designed, crafted, perhaps even coded. I borrowed a friend's advanced spectral analyzer, claiming I was working on a personal art project involving rare metals. David, bless his trusting heart, didn't ask too many questions. I placed the coin under the lens. What I saw wasn't a logo, but a complex, interwoven pattern of subatomic particles, arranged in a specific, non-random sequence. It was like a fingerprint, a signature. I cross-referenced this signature with every known database I could access. Declassified government projects, patents for advanced materials, even obscure scientific papers on theoretical physics. Hours blurred into a single agonizing search. Just as despair began to creep in, a hit. A partial match. A long-dormant project, codenamed Kronos Initiative, briefly mentioned in a heavily redacted document from the late 1980s. The document described experimental materials designed to withstand extreme temporal stresses. More importantly, it made a fleeting reference to an internal designation, Research Outpost Gamma Sector 7. My heart hammered against my ribs. Sector 7. The document led me down a rabbit hole of forgotten archives, urban legends, and conspiracy theories. Project Kronos had been officially decommissioned decades ago, citing unforeseen complications and resource reallocation. Unofficially, rumors persisted of a remote, highly secretive facility deep within the desolate stretches of the Nevada desert, a place where scientists had delved into forbidden territories, attempting to unravel the very fabric of time. The location was vague, coordinates obscured, but enough breadcrumbs remained for a determined individual to piece together. I knew I had to go. The messages from my future self, the escalating urgency, the sheer impossibility of it all, it coalesced into a terrifying certainty. This wasn't just a warning, it was a mission. The journey was a blur of adrenaline and anxiety. I drove for hours, leaving the familiar sprawl of the city behind, heading west, deeper into the vast, empty expanse of the desert. The sun beat down relentlessly, turning the landscape into a shimmering mirage. Every shadow seemed to hold a watchful eye, every distant sound a potential threat. My mind raced, replaying every cryptic message, every distorted image. What would I find there? What future was I trying to prevent, or perhaps trying to create? As dusk painted the sky in fiery hues of orange and purple, I finally reached the coordinates. There was nothing, just an endless expanse of rock and sand, punctuated by sparse, hardy vegetation. Doubt, cold and sharp, began to prick at me. Had I been wrong? Had I misinterpreted the data? Was this all an elaborate, cruel hoax? Then I saw it, almost perfectly camouflaged against the rugged terrain, a faint metallic glint. An access road barely discernible, overgrown with desert scrub. It led to a massive, perfectly circular depression in the earth, like an ancient impact crater, but too perfectly formed. At its center, nestled against a sheer rock face, was a structure. It was colossal, a brutalist monument to forgotten science. A series of reinforced concrete domes and angular, windowless buildings, partially swallowed by the encroaching sand, stood silent and imposing. Rust stained the metal doors and faded warning signs flapped in the desert wind, their text bleached illegible by decades of sun. This was it. Sector 7. The air grew heavy with an almost palpable sense of dread. A strange hum, low and resonant, vibrated through the ground, a sound that seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere at once. It was the sound of something immense, something dormant, stirring. Accessing the facility was surprisingly easy, or perhaps terrifyingly so. The main gate was rusted shut, but a smaller service entrance, half buried in sand, gave way with a groan of tortured metal. It was as if the place was waiting for me. The interior was a mausoleum of science. Dust motes danced in the sparse beams of light filtering through cracks in the ceiling. The air was stale, thick with the metallic tang of old machinery and the faint, acrid smell of ozone. Rows of defunct consoles, their screens dark and lifeless, lined vast laboratories. Wires snaked across the floor like petrified vines. I moved deeper, guided by an instinct that felt less like my own and more like a whisper from the future. The hum grew louder, more insistent, rattling my teeth. I found a central command center, surprisingly intact despite the decay. A single large screen, cracked but not shattered, dominated the room. I touched a dusty console. To my astonishment, a single green light flickered to life. A holographic projection shimmered into existence above the console. It was a rotating schematic of the facility, labeled Project Kronos, Temporal Displacement Research. My breath hitched. This was it. The truth. I frantically searched for data logs, anything to explain what had happened here. I found a series of audio recordings, designated lead researcher's personal log, Dr. Evelyn Reed. I initiated playback. Dr. Reed's voice, initially calm and academic, grew increasingly strained with each entry. She spoke of breakthroughs in manipulating space-time, of constructing a temporal conduit, to send information, even small objects, into the past or future. Her team believed they were on the verge of unlocking humanity's greatest secret. Then the tone shifted. Entry 47. Unforeseen energy fluctuations. The conduit is destabilizing. Readings indicate a localized temporal distortion, expanding rapidly within Sector 7. Entry 52. The paradoxes are manifesting. Small objects are appearing and disappearing. Personnel are reporting disorientation, memory lapses. We're losing control. The conduit isn't just sending things. It's tearing at the fabric of our own timeline. Entry 63. It's no longer a conduit. It's an anomaly. A tear. We tried to shut it down, but it resists. It's feeding, growing. We're trapped. The future, it's unraveling. Some of us are sending out warnings, desperate attempts to reach back to prevent this. But the anomaly, it distorts everything. It's trying to correct itself, to erase our interference. It's trying to erase us. My blood ran cold. The package, the device, the warnings, they weren't just from my future self. They were from their future, a future already being consumed by this temporal anomaly. My future self was likely part of Dr. Reed's team, or a subsequent generation trying to fix the catastrophe. As the logs continued, Dr. Reed's voice descended into frantic whispers, her words punctuated by strange, echoing distortions. The coin, it's a stabilizer, a beacon, a key, connects to the core. You have to find the core. It's the only way to close it. But beware, the anomaly, it fights back. It creates echoes, distortions. It wants to protect itself. It wants to become. Suddenly, the hum intensified, vibrating through the very floor. The holographic schematic flickered wildly, dissolving into static. The green light on the console pulsed erratically. A deep guttural groan echoed from somewhere deeper within the facility, a sound that seemed to warp the air itself. I looked around, my heart pounding. The shadows in the corners of the room seemed to deepen, to coil and writhe. A faint, shimmering outline of a person, translucent and ghostly, appeared for a split second by a far console, then vanished. An echo, a distortion. The anomaly was active. It was here around me. I gripped the coin, its metallic sheen now pulsing with a faint, internal light, mirroring the erratic green on the console. It was drawing me deeper, towards the source of the hum, towards the heart of the temporal tear. Dr. Reed's final, barely audible whisper echoed in my mind. The core, you have to reach the core, before it consumes everything, before there is no time left to save. I knew what I had to do. The future wasn't just a distant possibility. It was a present danger, actively unraveling around me. I was standing at the precipice of a temporal apocalypse, and the only way out was through. With a deep, shuddering breath, I pushed past the fear, past the echoes, and moved towards the source of the hum, towards the core of Sector 7, towards an impossible choice that would decide the fate of all existence. The air grew thick, not with dust or smoke, but with the very fabric of time unraveling. Each step I took into Sector 7 was a step through a kaleidoscope of existence. Echoes of laughter, whispers of forgotten conversations, the faint scent of rain on concrete, all flickered into being and vanished, like ghosts of moments that never quite solidified. It was disorienting, a constant assault on the senses, making my head throb with an insistent ache. The hum intensified, vibrating not just in my ears, but in my bones, a deep, resonant frequency that felt both ancient and impossibly advanced. It was the sound of creation and destruction, intertwined. The corridor opened into a vast, cavernous space. It wasn't a room in the conventional sense, not something built by hands. It felt organic, like the inside of a colossal crystalline geode. Walls of shimmering, iridescent material pulsed with an inner light, casting long, shifting shadows that danced like phantoms. In the very center, suspended above a swirling vortex of pure energy, was the source of the hum. It was a structure unlike anything I'd ever seen. Not metal, not stone, but a complex lattice of interwoven light and matter, constantly reconfiguring itself. It pulsed with a rhythmic, ethereal glow, drawing the chaotic temporal energy from the room into its core, then releasing it in controlled, mesmerizing waves. This was it, the nexus, the heart of Sector 7. As I approached, a wave of pure information washed over me, bypassing my ears and eyes, surging directly into my mind. It wasn't a voice, but a chorus of voices layered and interwoven, yet somehow undeniably my voice. My own thoughts, my own fears, my own hopes echoed back at me, stretched and distorted through an immense, unimaginable span of time. Michael, the collective voice resonated, a symphony of my own consciousness. You have arrived, as you always were destined to. I stumbled back, my mind reeling. Who are you? What is this place? The words felt inadequate, hollow in the face of such overwhelming presence. We are the culmination, the voice replied, the words forming with a clarity that belied their impossible origin. The future you are destined to create. We are, in essence, you. The nexus pulsed brighter, and within its shimmering structure, I saw fleeting images. A sprawling, harmonious civilization bathed in golden light, humanity reaching for the stars, a collective consciousness that transcended physical form, interwoven with the very fabric of the cosmos. It was breathtaking, a vision of ultimate potential. This future, the voice continued, this existence is born from your timeline, Michael. Your choices, your actions, your very being, are the foundation upon which we built ourselves. But the foundation is crumbling. The images in the nexus flickered, replaced by scenes of utter chaos. Timelines fracturing, realities colliding, the universe itself dissolving into a void. I saw glimpses of my own life, moments with Jessica, my apartment, my job, all dissolving into static like a corrupted video file. The temporal singularity, the voice explained, is upon us. The paradoxes created by our attempts to communicate, to guide you, have destabilized the very timeline we depend on. The packages were a desperate measure, an attempt to nudge causality, to ensure your arrival here, to prevent our own erasure. My head spun. But if you sent the packages to prevent the collapse, and sending them caused the collapse, then it's a paradox. A loop. Precisely, the voice confirmed, a note of profound weariness in its multi-layered tone. A closed causal loop. We exist because you made choices guided by our messages. But those messages, by their very nature, introduced anomalies into the past, into your present. The fabric of reality cannot sustain such a contradiction indefinitely. It is tearing itself apart. So what do? I asked, my voice barely a whisper, the weight of everything crashing down on me. How do I fix it? The nexus shimmered, and the images within coalesced into a single stark choice. There are two paths, Michael. Two ways to resolve the paradox, to stabilize the timeline. The first, the voice began, is to destroy the nexus. This device is the anchor of our existence, the conduit through which our future self-consciousness can interact with your past. Severing it would prevent our birth, erase our entire civilization from existence. But in doing so, the paradox would cease, the temporal distortions would dissipate, and your current timeline would stabilize. You would live your life, Michael. A life without the threat of collapse. A life where humanity never reaches the potential we represent. A contained, finite existence. I stared at the images of that other potential future. A peaceful but ultimately ordinary human history. It was safe, familiar. It was my life. The second path, the voice continued, and the nexus pulsed with an unimaginable intensity, is to become the anchor, to merge with the nexus, to allow your individual consciousness, your very essence, to become the stabilizing force, the foundational node for our existence. Your personal memories, your individual identity as Michael would dissolve, yes, but you would not cease to be. You would become us. You would transcend, become part of a grander consciousness, woven into the fabric of time itself, ensuring the stability of your timeline and the eventual birth of our future. The images returned, the cosmic civilization, the transcendence, the peace. But this time I saw myself dissolving into it, my individual form breaking apart, my mind expanding beyond comprehension, losing the familiar boundaries of Michael. An impossible choice, I whispered, the words echoing my previous thought. My life or everything. Your life as you know it versus your evolution, the voice corrected gently. The fate of all existence, and the culmination of humanity's true potential, rests on your decision. Do you preserve the finite, or embrace the infinite? My mind raced, reeling through every memory, every experience. Jessica's smile, the comfort of her hand in mine, the mundane beauty of a sunrise, the taste of coffee, the simple joy of laughter with friends. All of it so precious, so deeply ingrained in who I was. To give that up, to become a nameless, timeless entity, a component in a cosmic machine, it felt like death. But then I thought of the packages, the cryptic messages, the undeniable pull towards something greater. The sense of being a pawn in a game I didn't understand, yet knowing deep down that I had to play. The fear, the doubt, the constant questioning of my own sanity. All of it had led me here, to this moment, to this impossible crossroads. And the last message etched into my memory: embrace the unknown. Was this the unknown it spoke of? Not just a new path, but the dissolution of the path itself becoming the very road? I looked at the nexus, at the shimmering, pulsating core of existence. I looked at the images of the future self, the boundless potential, the ultimate understanding. And then I looked inward, at the fleeting echoes of my own life, already beginning to fray at the edges from the temporal distortions. What was a life lived in a dying timeline? What was individuality if reality itself was dissolving? The choice wasn't about saving Michael, it was about saving something. And if I was truly the foundation, then perhaps my purpose was not to live a life, but to become life itself. A profound calm settled over me, a clarity that cut through the fear and the noise. The hum of the nexus no longer felt threatening, but inviting, like a lullaby of infinite possibilities. My individual existence, my small, fragile self, felt suddenly insignificant compared to the vastness of what lay before me. I understand, I said, my voice steady, imbued with a newfound resolve. I choose the future. I took a step forward, then another, walking towards the nexus. The air around me crackled with energy, and the echoes of my past screamed in protest, trying to pull me back. I felt the familiar weight of my past, the phantom touch of Jessica's hand, the warmth of my home. But I pushed through it, my gaze fixed on the shimmering heart of the device. As I reached out, my hand passed through the shimmering surface, not solid, but like entering a liquid stream of pure light. A jolt, not of pain but of pure energy, coursed through me. My body began to dissolve, not into dust but into light, into information. My senses expanded, stretched beyond comprehension. I saw not just the room but the entire facility, the city, the planet, the galaxy, the universe, all at once as a single interconnected web of causality. My individual memories flashed before me, not as a review, but as data points merging, integrating, becoming part of a larger tapestry. Jessica's face, her laughter, my own name. They didn't vanish, they simply became strands in an infinite, beautiful pattern. The fear receded, replaced by an overwhelming sense of peace, of belonging, of being truly home. The hum intensified, then slowly, gracefully began to recede. The echoes faded, the temporal distortions smoothed out. Reality, once fractured, began to knit itself back together, stronger, more stable than before. I was no longer Michael. I was the nexus. I was the anchor. I was the whisper in the future, the guide in the past. I was the collective consciousness, the culmination, the paradox resolved. I was the one who sent the packages because I was the one who became the future that needed to exist. The loop was closed, not by breaking it but by completing it. A profound, tranquil silence settled over the chamber, a silence that echoed with the gentle hum of a universe gently recalibrating itself. And then, as suddenly as it had begun, the overwhelming sensation receded, leaving behind a profound sense of calm, a boundless clarity, and a quiet awareness of everything. I opened my eyes. I was lying on my couch. The scent of coffee lingered faintly in the air. Sunlight streamed through the window, illuminating dust motes dancing in the morning light. Everything was familiar, mundane, profoundly normal. But it wasn't. The coffee table was empty. The package was gone. There was no trace of the box, no lingering scent of ozone, no metallic tang. It was as if it had never existed, a dream fading upon waking. Yet I knew it wasn't a dream. I stood up, feeling a subtle shift in my perception, as if the world had gained an extra dimension I could now instinctively sense. I walked to the window, looking out at the city below, the familiar skyline, the bustling streets, the ordinary lives unfolding. But now I saw patterns, connections, the delicate interplay of cause and effect, the ripples of possibility stretching into the future. It was all so clear, so vibrant. I reached into my pocket, a subconscious gesture, and my fingers brushed against something small, smooth, and cold. I pulled it out. It was a perfectly smooth, obsidian black stone, no bigger than my thumb. It pulsed with a faint, almost imperceptible warmth against my skin. It wasn't a fragment of the nexus, not in the physical sense. It was a tangible anchor, a quiet reminder. A single profound thought echoed in my newly expanded mind. Not my own, but a part of the collective, now a part of me. Asterisk, the journey continues, Michael. And now you are the guide. Asterisk. I smiled a genuine, knowing smile. The package that arrived from my future self hadn't just changed my life. It had given me one. It had given me purpose. And it had given me the universe.